Awesome. Welcome to Think and Drink number 7. I can't believe we're already at the 7th one, and it's July. It's going to be the July 4th weekend, and you know what? The heat is coming on, and COVID's still the same. Nothing's really changed. So, unfortunately, but we just got to take on the heat at this point. So, let me just share with you guys the PowerPoint that I got on today. Let's see. All right. Okay, so today, yeah, we're talking about all sorts of aspects of heat illness, and I know there's a lot of continuing education out there, and we already know what to do, the prevention side of it, and things like that, and how do we treat these exertional heat illnesses. There's so many Con Ed courses on there that talk about how to prevent them, and in fact, we always hear every year there's some sort of exertional heat stroke that goes on, and sometimes we take it for granted of how valuable the education is. So I really wanted to focus on tonight's session, just talking about novel ideas that have just been popping up about um, heat illness. And I think heat tolerance and just the education part of it, I think this is something that I feel like for all of us to really just hone in and learn something from these two articles. Just to go over our objectives once more, we're always going to discuss about a selected current peer-reviewed journal article related to sports medicine with other fields of healthcare. We're always going to evaluate the evidence discussed in these peer-reviewed journal articles. We're going to compare the evidence and see how we can bridge the gap. And most importantly, we're always going to drink and think responsibly at the same time. And I know some of us have beers. Unfortunately, I'm still at the work just because there's better Wi-Fi. I didn't really bring a beer this time, but I will make sure that I clink and celebrate with you guys because you guys are committed. Obviously, we have no disclosures or conflicts, but cheers. Cheers to everyone who's able to make it out today. Really appreciate it. And yeah, let's get started. So the very first article, I really enjoyed this article just because it came out with just something new. It wasn't like it it wasn't anything that we already knew about it, but this is the first time I've heard about heat intolerance. And I think this is something that kind of, for me, it really started it started scratching the surface of how do you know after someone has suffered a heat illness, are they ready to go back into sport? So to give some context to this article, um, it was done in Israel, and they're looking at they're looking at 175 individuals that had an episode of heat illness, and they go through a heat tolerance test. So in this article, I believe they had a testing protocol that consisted of 120 minutes of walking at a speed of 5 kilometers per hour, which is about 3.3 miles an hour, give or take. So it's kind of like a brisk walk on an incline of 2% in a climate chamber with a relative humidity of 40% and a temperature of 40 degrees Celsius. So that's 40 degrees Celsius is pretty high. That'd definitely be in that triple digit if we're talking about degrees Fahrenheit. And then to add on to the humidity, we're talking about an environment that's something that, I mean, luckily for us in the Bay Area, we don't see that too often. But I know, like, perhaps in San Diego or in Tampa, when we have the high temperatures and humidity or not, we might be running into that risk of heat illnesses. So what they did was they were able to take a temperature reading right at the start. They took one right at 60 minutes, and then they took one. Then they took one right at 120, and they're able to extrapolate some of the data and just to see where they were at in terms of temperature. And then they were able to use those readings and then put it into a formula just to see where they are in terms of heat tolerance. So So if we look at page 425, when they talk about their methods, they look at the terminal, they look at the temperature readings and the heart rate readings, and they're looking at whether if they exceed this threshold of 38.5 degrees Celsius, which would be around 101.3 degrees Fahrenheit, and they're looking at a heart rate of 150. If those are just spiking up like crazy, you're classifying them as they cannot tolerate the heat. So they would be they would be in that heat intolerance category. And then when they get into then when they look at the difference between the 120 and the 60 minute mark, when they look at the difference, if it exceeds 0.45, you're going to classify them as heat intolerance. For the next classification, they're looking at, if they're looking at the difference from 120 minutes to 60 minutes of that test, and it's between 0.25 to 0.45, and then their heart rate is around 120 to 150 beats per minute, you're going to consider whether you're going to kind of make that best judgment call, whether if they're heat tolerant or they're heat intolerant. And then if they go below that 0.25 difference or below that 120 beats per minute, then you're going to classify them as they are heat tolerant. So yeah, I thought this kind of novel idea, although there are definitely a lot of limitations, seeing that they are looking at a specific group of subjects. They're all males. This was in a military setting. I think this was an interesting idea, just to gauge whether if a participant who just had heat illness, how would we be able to quantify them to get back into play? So I would like to hear from you guys. What do you guys think about this article when you guys read it? Let's see.
I thought it was pretty interesting too. I'd be curious. One of my thoughts too is, what were the soldiers? Obviously, they're in a controlled environment, but what were they dressed in? Were they dressed in their normal military wear? Were they wearing gear? I don't remember that saying that. Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, I'm trying to look through the article right now. It seems like, let's see, they didn't really mention. Yeah, I don't think they mentioned anything about wearing gear.
Yeah.
Anything. I think they were just going straight off of medical history, whether if they've had an episode or not. So I think that was definitely what you mentioned. I think that was a good point to bring up, because whether this is applicable to, let's say, our sports population, not every sport's going to be heavily equipment laden. So whether this test would be reliable or not, I mean, that's still in the question. However, I felt like the way that they constructed their test, I think that was just something that's like it was a really good baseline per se. Like, I think it wasn't anything like you had to do any sort of exercise, but I think it's just like, if you could not tolerate while you're walking in this extreme environment, then clearly, if you were trying to exert yourself in this environment, then it wouldn't fare well for you.
Correct.
Right.
I thought too it was interesting that using it as a determination, if you are, I fascinated like you about the determining if they're heat tolerant or intolerant, put risk. And I've always been in the knowledge or thought of anybody who's had like a heat illness is usually there's some repercussions coming back from it, and it's a little bit slower. And I haven't seen much research on that. I haven't seen how they deal with that. I remember talking to a doctor where I thought we had a kid who had like a heat illness, maybe a heat exhaustion versus a heat stroke. And he's like, oh no, you don't have to worry about it. And maybe that's the difference between heat exhaustion and heat stroke. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was probably 10, 15 years ago though. So
right. Yeah. And I think I think I think now that you mentioned that, I feel like in this article they didn't really talk about whether if the subjects who had a heat illness, whether if it was heat exhaustion or heat stroke. I think that was I felt like that could, or no, actually it was, no, actually they did define it. Never mind. So it was
Yeah.
all individuals were male soldiers who had sustained an episode of definitive or suspected exertional heat stroke. So yeah, I think like as far as like heat exhaustion, do you feel like there's more repercussion or more recurrences with heat exhaustion um, uh, as opposed to heat strokes? Would you guys see like an athlete that just like has more recurrences with heat exhaustion, or just um, or the latter really?
I would think, and maybe I base this off of what you see in the news. You hear about heat strokes all the time, right? But those are usually those severe cases where somebody dies.
Right.
How many published? You know, do you see anything about heat exhaustion? No. I don't think I've ever seen anything on something published. Oh, somebody suffered a heat exhaustion event. So
Right.
maybe, so
That
it's
would
hard to determine.
dominate the news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, I luckily, as since being a certified, I haven't seen a lot of true heat strokes. Had guys go into full body cramps, but their core temp was never in that elevated. We need to immediately plunge them, kind of range. That being said, though, because of that, we do see a lot more heat exhaustion type stuff because you shut them down before you get to that extreme level, which is a big reason why we're there. And the kids that we almost know after you're with the team for a while, at least in our setting, that like this dude is gonna be an issue at some point. It's whether it's day 1 of camp, day 2 of camp, day 3 of camp, he's gonna be an issue. But likely, and most of the time after he has that first episode, that kind of heat exhaustion day where he goes into some massive cramps and we have to IV him, he doesn't have another recurring episode almost the rest of the season unless we have some unseasonably warm weather or he gets sick or something.
Right.
So it's almost like it scares them into taking care of themselves enough. Or is it on the back end, are we just keeping an eye out for that kid knowing that at some point he could be an issue and we step in and shut stuff down before he gets to that point? A little bit of both, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like when we catch them right in that heat exhaustion episode, I totally agree. I think the patients just they start to realize like, oh, if I feel bad at this moment, like I can't imagine what having a heat stroke is like. As a matter of fact, like I don't even know if they were able to feel that, and that's the scary thing too. And then I think it's crazy too if we kind of like transcend it down to like the secondary school setting and just hearing like, let's say, I mean, Florida, for example, I feel like there's always some sort of case coming out from Florida every year, and I think it's alarming to hear about that. And let alone, I remember there's that HBO special where even like Dr. Casa was on there and talking about heat illnesses and how frustrating it is that it like how many more deaths do we need uh, to have happen in order to make changes in how we prevent these sort of heat illnesses. And I feel like and I think just the recurring episodes, I feel like there still isn't much to quantify. I think we always have let's say that heat illness episode, and a lot of people are gonna just maybe they run a couple tests that may not be relevant or may not be as specific as this test, and they kind of go based off of judgment. And I feel like this article kind of alluded to that, that maybe there is a way that we can determine whether if someone is tolerant in those extreme conditions. Let's see.
Philip, you guys know I maybe don't read as well, but was there someplace in there where talking about the objectivity of the readings too, or was that the other article? Because it seemed like there was like they had different people interpret the results. I think that was the other article.
I think I know. So the other article, the one that, so the other article where they had the questionnaires, I think that's where they had a lot of different interpretations.
Yeah. So
yeah, we could definitely go over that. I think when you're talking about the interpretations, I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done with these heat tolerance tests. What's like so in table 3 towards the end of the article, we talk about like the probability of heat tolerance. I mean, it's still, they put numbers to it, but it's still not specific enough, right?
Yeah.
They have like heat intolerance, but then how would you still differentiate between heat intolerance and borderline heat intolerance? There's still a number, and that's still, you go from 0 to 0.49 as opposed to 0.5 to 0.89. That's a pretty wide range if we're going from a 0 to 1 scale, right? And then even so, it's like the heat tolerance, you have to make it into that 10% of the probability scale, which I find it's like, it's like we slap numbers to it, and it's not specific enough in a way.
Kind of like COVID testing. Oh wait, sorry.
Right. Yeah, it's like the quantitative test, and let's see what happens when we swab up the nose, right? Yeah.
And I don't know if I missed it somewhere in there, Phil, but you had mentioned that there wasn't necessarily a time frame on when their heat illness occurred. It was just in their health chart at some point that they had one. So then they used the test.
Yeah, I don't think they went too far in depth. I was surprised that they didn't really go into, like, when they mentioned like the methods and things like that. I didn't really see much. Okay, actually no, they had like the study population right here, but yeah, they didn't really talk about when did they have this exertional heat stroke. But I feel like I wonder if like in the military setting it didn't really matter. Like I don't know if the time of year when they had the exertional heat illness or the heat stroke, actually, I don't know if that was like relevant to their study, but they did classify the exertional heat stroke as having a rectal temperature of 40 degrees Celsius, and then they were in and out of consciousness within minutes to an hour, and then they were cooling within 15 minutes. So I think other than that, and then just seeing how they split up the subjects, that's all we really got from the demographics. So yeah, I wish they had a little bit more detail with that.
Yeah, and I'm just curious because I just want to know how long was it between their episode and when they tested, because to make this any sort of systematic test or objective testing in the college or pro sports world, they're expecting these to be back in practice maybe the next day. So when you find time to do a heat chamber at this intensity, exercise to see how tolerant they are to the heat again, like that, it's a great idea. But I'm also really interested that how many people were intolerant, assuming that maybe there was weeks in between their episode and when they did the testing. How well are they taking care of themselves? How well were they trained in the beginning? And I don't know. There's just a lot of things I would like to talk to the researchers or somebody about, because I don't know. There could be a lot of variables in here that could lead to some of the things they're seeing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I wonder if like the time between when they went unconscious to becoming conscious, and just, because they were talking about within those within minutes to an hour. I mean, that's a long time range, and I wonder if that has any play with whether if they are intolerant or they become tolerant. So yeah, I agree. I think just knowing more about the subjects, I feel like that would give a little more power to this article, for sure.
I'd be curious, like, the idea for me is this a great preventative measure too? Like, we can maybe identify people. Say you got somebody who hasn't had a heat illness, but you put them through the test to determine if they have some heat intolerance. Now that's a pretty big undertaking, right? And how you're going to do that, I don't know. But
Right.
does that help determine?
Yeah, I think yeah, it's like I feel like in future, I guess in future years, if all of a sudden we were able to replicate the study for any sort of population, I think it would be an interesting screening protocol in conjunction to like the physicals and things like that. Well, yeah, but seeing like how efficient this would be and whether if it's practical, maybe not. I mean, I think it just depends on what we're seeing, especially like let's say like here in the Bay Area, do we see a lot of like the heat illness cases? Not as much, but like in the hotter environments where heat illnesses are more prevalent. I mean, I think this would be a great screening tool for those that have never had it, and yeah, I'd be interested in that too.
Not only does my clinic have every imaging modality you would want,
Yeah.
I forgot to tell you guys, I actually have 3 heat chambers with treadmills.
Yes.
We can make this happen.
You're just putting it on the budget. This is the unlimited budget kind of clinic, right? Isabel, when you're in Florida, like have you seen a lot of cases with heat illnesses? I feel like we're pretty lucky on our coast, but if you've had any experiences with heat illnesses, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, um, yeah, I'm curious about what your experience was like.
Well, in undergrad, as an intern, I didn't actually get to witness or experience any. So that's a good thing. Me being in Florida, and I went to UCF. But as I graduated, I've been in all outpatient settings, air conditioned indoor. So I haven't really gotten to experience any heat related illnesses, although one time heat exhaustion inside a clinic at 72 degrees AC. That did happen once, which was a little odd because that patient had been attending therapy for already 6 months. So it was just out of the blue. However, because I played college soccer in Iowa, when I did play over there, there was a few of us because our coach was a first-time head coach for the women's soccer team at Iowa Central when I played in JUCO. And she wasn't the most, I guess you can say, knowledgeable of a lot of different things because she actually she was in Miami as a head coach for a high school for 2 years, then came to Iowa. And prior to being in Miami, she was in Brazil. So there was a lot of updates on things. So practices definitely were a little lengthy. Those preseason 3 days were, speed and agilities, hour and a half at 6 or 7 a.m. Then you have, weights in the middle of the day, anywhere from 12 to 2 or 12 to 1. Then you have your 3-hour practices from 3:30 to 6:30. So it was definitely tough. So I actually suffered heat exhaustion when I was in college, but I didn't know it at the time. But I did have all the signs and symptoms because definitely when profuse sweating, then it was, a little bit pale. Then I was like walking like I was drunk. People noticed it, but I didn't. I was just like, maybe I'll just eat a little bit of food and then kind of lay down. And then I was up for speed and agilities the next morning.
Oh my God, that's insane.
So yeah, it was definitely tough. A lot of knowledge during that year. A lot of very strict, like if you broke any of her rules, it was about an hour and a half run. And then after that would be some just calisthenics, plyometrics right after for about 20 minutes. So she kept a pretty tight ship.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Other than that, so it was me that suffered some, and then actually a couple of other girls in that first year that she coached. There was a few instances of heat exhaustion, but at that time we didn't know so much, and when we were experiencing the symptoms, it was after practice. It was, you know, just like, oh, okay, maybe you just need to lie down. Maybe you just need to drink some water. Or like, okay. And then we're just out for the rest of the night.
Wow.
Until the next morning, you know, somebody's got to wake you up, because if you don't show up and you're rooming with them, then that hour and a half run is you, and then you're running with them. It was just a whole cycle all over again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
other
think,
than that,
yeah.
I don't have any with athletes that I was working with, other than just personal experience from playing college soccer.
Right. Right. Yeah. Now that you kind of mentioned about how your soccer training regimen was, I think with this article too, I'd be curious of how fit they were. I think just going back to the subject data, I think just knowing like their fitness level beforehand, and knowing where they were at before they had their heat stroke, I think that would have been interesting to see. Um, that would be interesting to see, and how that kind of relates to heat tolerance and things of that nature.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking that was I was thinking about that kind of question, like you would say, their overall fitness, as well as any activities that they had been doing prior to, you know, being with the military, because I guess you can say the pool was 18 to 22 years of age. So I don't know how long they had already been participating in this, I guess you can say, military phase as of right now when they did do this test. Also, I was just trying to look up the setting, like where was the actual setting taking place? Because, you know, doing this test, even though it's a heat tolerance test, doing it in like Arizona, the Arizona heat is a lot different than maybe Louisiana heat.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
that would be, so this heat tolerance test would, even though, you know, there's specific numbers of the heat that you want that individual to get up to or not get up to in order to do these different, I guess you could say, classifications.
Mhm.
I believe that for different areas, because the heat is different, it would actually be, you know, at different times of the day, you know, different months out of the year, and or different heat that of that day or in that climate, it would have to be to get relatively or replicate that test in order to get the same outcomes.
Right. Right. Yeah. Completely agree. Yeah. All right. Anyone else wants to add anything to this, to Sherman's and his colleagues' article? Nothing else. Oh, and I just realized Josh Zalk is also on this call right here. Let's see.
What's up, Bill? How's it going?
Yeah, doing great. Welcome. Oh yeah, if I don't think this is your first time, right? So
Hmm.
mind introducing yourself just a quick bit before we move on to the next article?
All right. So I'm Josh. I met Bill through a physio class we took at West Valley a couple summers ago. Currently in OT school through WashU in St. Louis, back in the Bay Area for a little bit, just because I'm doing telehealth for my clinical rotations. And I actually, so the school that Bill works at, I attended 7, 8 years ago. I played for the football team, so I'm very familiar with Ross and his practice, especially. So, and hearing all the heat tolerance, stuff along those lines, I mean, hits home. It didn't happen to me, but we all struggle with heat during the summer conditioning. So, it's very interesting to hear, just because I could be helping coach kids like down the line just for fun. So, it's good to know these strategies down for the long run.
Awesome. Glad you could join us today.
Hey, Josh, when did you graduate from Willow Glen?
2013.
Oh, gosh. That's like 7 years ago already, man.
Yep.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, and football teams clearly changed a lot since then. I don't recognize any of the kids anymore. So, different generation.
Yeah. Back in the day. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Good seeing you, man. How you doing?
Doing well. Just started my clinical rotation, my first clinical rotation for OT this week, and very pumped about it.
Good for you, man. That's awesome. Good to hear, dude. Good seeing you guys that were all Willow Glen Rams back in the day, and seeing where you are now.
Yep.
That's cool.
Awesome.
Very, very cool.
All right, let's move on to this the second article. So this one's called Knowledge and Belief Toward Heat Safety and Hydration Strategies Among Runners. So it's a preliminary evaluation It was pretty much, it was like a survey kind of study where they looked at runners who registered for the Falmouth, is it Falmouth or Falmouth, whatever the Massachusetts, it's in Massachusetts, but it's the Falmouth Road Race. It's a 7 miles. I had to look up what exactly it was. I thought it was going to be like a marathon, like this crazy East Coast marathon only East Coast people know about, but it's a 7-mile road race, and they took the people who registered for this race, and they gave them a survey just to see how well educated the runners are regarding heat safety and hydration strategies, and so they would ask them these questions before the race, and then they viewed a video, and then they would also ask them again after the race. So it was really interesting to see how these participants answered the questions. So as kind of expected, like I wasn't surprised when they had 8,319 runners and there was only a quarter of them that answered the survey. I mean, not a lot of people, it's very unlikely that you'd have 100% of all the participants email or responding to an email and hoping that you can get like a very, very powerful study. I don't think anyone is really interested in that, but they got a pretty good sample size. I think it was just around, let's see, they had about, just about a quarter, 2,091 responses, and they participated in the questionnaire before the race, and then they would participate then they participated in the surveys after they watched the video, and then when they got to after the race, the numbers, they still pulled all the participants, and they got about a little bit less than a quarter of those responses. So what was interesting was that they didn't really say whether if some of the respondents answered both the pre and the post, or if it was just the post. I think the statistics were still out there. It was just a lot of different statistics. But I think going to the discussion, it was pretty interesting about how they were, how some people were viewing, or I guess from the results and how they discussed it. It was interesting how they kind of viewed a lot of these different educational material. I think there was, let's see, I'm gonna try to look for this real quick. So what I found, I think I underlined this part. I think the cool thing was when they had, let's see, the top 3 hydration strategies used by those who watched the educational video versus those who didn't, they were very similar. So whether if you watched the video or not, the runners consumed ample amounts of water the night before the race, or they drank at the water stations along the course, and they avoided alcohol the night before the race. So I felt like, so no matter whether if you watched the video or not, it seemed like it was kind of common sense on what to do, or based off of common trends of hydration strategies. And yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting, and how some people are able to take some of the education about heat illnesses, and it kind of just goes to show that not much of the heat education has really changed, but I think people still know it, and they're still going to do what fits them, really. That's what I really got from this article. And I know there was a couple other things, but I want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think about this article by Hosokawa?
I would say it definitely shows kind of, you can educate people on what you need to do. I thought it was interesting. Most people had a pretty good idea of all those common things. I think that what you consider common sense, it was the deeper things they didn't really understand or didn't answer correctly. But I think they mentioned in there too that a lot of people, after they did the pre-test answer to questions, they changed their behaviors a little bit and then probably helped them in the long run. So to me, it shows educating people on what you need to do is important.
Right. Yeah, I think like when it came to like the questions where they're talking about, let's see. Yeah, when they talk about like heat syncope and exertional heat stroke, and when they talk about, let's see, I thought I read something about like rhabdomyolysis, or that was just in the article. But the survey questions, there were some of them that were just talking, they were going more into like the medical stuff. So I think those questions, from what I remember, those questions were kind of on that borderline whether if people truly understood those or not.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that there was a question about, the proper acclimatization period. Like I don't think that's very common knowledge. So,
Yeah.
but that might, be part of why they threw it in there, to see how basic of knowledge is that, and then what's also important information to get out there to these runners in their training periods and trying to lead up to the race. I don't know. I thought that question was especially kind of interesting, because
Right.
I'm sure a lot of people think 3 days is pretty sufficient to get used to heat.
Yes. Yeah, I felt like do you feel like the hydration and the timing of hydration is more important, or the acclimatization part?
Both. I don't know. I think you
Go
can have
hand in
somebody
hand.
who is really well hydrated, who, no matter of how well they prepared from that standpoint or a nutritional standpoint, that they could go out and just get zapped by the heat.
Mm,
I don't know. I don't know. That's a really good question. I don't know I really can't tell you which one I think is more important. It's always good to be properly hydrated. That's going to be your best bet that you can have the most control over as your individual. But it's always important to try to get used to the environment you're going to work out in and train in. So I don't know.
yeah.
You stumped me. I don't know.
I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead, Josh.
Thank you. I'm just going back to my playing days from high school. Something I personally would always do is I brought a whole gallon of water, and I just drank it the whole day in school. Like, I brought it with me, refilled it every passing period. I drank like quite a bit before practice. So like I did that the entire day, because it would have tendency to get 90 degrees, 100 degrees in like August, September, and I never had heat issues whenever that happened. So, and the days when I didn't do that, like when we had double days, I tended to struggle towards the end. So just giving myself plenty of time beforehand always helped out. So I would definitely emphasize, hydration time, just because of my personal experience.
Right.
I was wondering if it's geographically based, and like us in California where we don't deal with it, versus Isabel who is in Iowa, or then in Florida, maybe hydration is more important, or maybe acclimatization is more important in those areas than it is for us. When it's and then down in San Diego, if it's 72 degrees all the time, how do you don't need to adapt as much, right?
Really brutal, I tell you. It's weather every day.
I didn't know it's so tough over there.
It's
Hard.
rough.
I guess, thinking about it now, like the way you say that, Scott, the geographic, differences. I guess going back to just this past season, right? We have 72 and sunny almost year round, and we train here, and we had to fly out to Hawaii to play there. And that humidity, the heat really wasn't much different than what we had experienced, but the humidity level was so much higher. That game was harder for us at sea level than the 2 elevation games that we played at night earlier in the year.
Yeah.
Our guys were absolutely zapped I mean, they played a great game. They fought. We didn't have a lot of issues. The only issues we had were guys that were already sick with the flu. Other than that, like, we didn't have a lot of cramping issues. But I can tell you that the guys were as hydrated as they could be and had everything given to them all week, and they'd prepared. We'd forced fluids down their throats and done our pre-night gator lights and everything else, and they still had a lot of issue. So I think that's one of those things where you can, if you move regions, that acclimatization is pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say I definitely agree. I remember, Josh, remember when we went to Denver, and just like right when we got into that high elevation, and just like we had to keep track of those guys that had sickle cell trait, and just thinking about like just being prepared, like no matter what, when we get into like a new territory, it's just like that preparation part is key. And I totally agree with you. I think it's just like the hydration and all that when you're staying in the same region. I think that's where it's key, and being able to prepare for that. But then yeah, especially moving from region to region, and we don't know exactly like what the environment is, and it's important to really educate, like, let's say coaches or even like just the logistics people, just knowing like, hey, like we do need to get some extra days in to make sure we acclimatize to that environment. Yeah, I totally agree.
I mean, yeah, being in St. Louis just for a couple of years and going on runs weekly there over the summers. It's so much different compared to California, because in California, anytime I ran, I ran the entire time. But in Missouri, there were a few times where I had to walk for like the last half mile or so, just I could not handle the rest of it. That's the humidity is real, like compared to California. And I still can't tell you how to adjust to the humidity. Just run when it's cooler, but obviously when you play certain sports, you can't control that. So
No,
humidity is for sure a challenge.
Josh, I grew up
being a Westerner.
I lived there for 25 years, and you don't ever get used to the humidity. You walk out of your door at 9 p.m. at night to go to your car, and you sweat.
Yep.
It's
brutal.
I bet. Isabel, did you have? I thought you had something to say. Sorry if we cut you off.
No, I didn't really have anything to say other than I didn't know how nice it was in the areas of California people are. Especially like now, recently over here, we're in either high 90s or high 80s over here at this point in time. But it's all right, okay type of days. It's not the 100+ heat, so that's always a good day.
Right. Yeah.
But I did have a question though. It did talk about in the article about video.
Oh, yeah.
Is that something, because I don't work directly with athletics, high school athletics, college athletics. Is that something that is mandatory or recommended or suggested? So if for some reason, the layout for the season is, like Josh was saying, there's 2 areas where there's a higher altitude and then there's a Hawaii game. Is it for some reason mandatory or suggested that there is like maybe like a 3 to 5 minute video? Hey, this is, we're going to be playing in these certain areas. This is what you need to know to be prepared for this season, as in like a preseason type of thing. Or maybe, some people go over video maybe prior to the next game, maybe the week before, or I'm not too sure how that works or if that's even a thing.
We don't definitely do any sort of like video education like that. I mean, when the players come in the college setting, every season they have to go through an orientation of like, here's the concussion video, the signs, symptoms. I think it's a great idea. I would love to show a 5-minute hydration video at that point. I wonder if you could see some, especially in football camp. I'm football heavy. It's just what I do. If you might see some benefit from giving a little bit more education to the guys and forcing them to see some good information. One thing that we don't give them any like resources, like videos or any handouts or anything, like when we're heading to elevation or headed to a high humidity area. But what we do is mandatory gator lights after practice if we're heading to elevation or we're headed to like Hawaii. So it's something we do every day in camp for 30 days when we're there. And then we kind of discontinue it once we get into the regular season. But then when we have those elevation games, we do force them to drink more liquids throughout the week. And they have to get it on the way to the locker room just to try to CYA from our standpoint.
Right.
So then we can hopefully prevent cramping.
Yeah, Scott, what do you guys do over at MIDI?
I know we do require coaches. There's a growing list of educational stuff they have to do, concussion, sudden cardiac arrest. I think this last year we just added heat and illness stuff too, so they have to be aware of that. I don't believe the kids have to have anything done on that, if I recall right, but I think the parents may have to look at that too. And it's I want to say it's the NFHS that has a free course that you can look at.
Yeah.
So we're trying to bring that education to them a little bit.
Yeah. Do you feel like educating? I feel like the education part, it can't just stop at the coaches and the parents. I think just knowing, like, especially like I feel like the student athletes for sure just have to know the signs and symptoms and what to look out for, especially just preventing. I think it's interesting because like we have these NFHS videos that come out, and I know that they update the information on there, and just seeing like just knowing that that medicine always changes every year, but I feel like sometimes some of the coaches just don't change with the times. Like even though they're required to watch these videos, they still go into that whole mindset of, oh, this is how we dealt with it when I was in my playing days or things like that. I remember we were covering JV football practice, and I remember at the end of practice, every coach, there's like 4 or 5 coaches on the JV football team, and each one of them had a spiel to say, and it was all drink water. And all the kids that were just like, they're just half kneeling with the helmet and the pads, and they're just all listening to coach, and it's just like drink water, and they heard that like 5 times, but it's like a broken record. There's no other educational value to that. And I think for me to just witness that and just see like, man, yeah, we have to, I feel like from here it's now looking at like maybe we can pull in this video, this intervention of putting in a video and educating people and maybe asking them see what they know about heat illnesses, and then figure out how to bridge those gaps, those learning gaps for our patients. I think this is definitely, like, this article right here is just definitely valuable of where we can kind of bridge that gap for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the only survey like Coach Cab like would give us was just evaluating just our readiness for a team in general. Nothing about heat illnesses, nothing about concussions. But I feel that stuff would absolutely be valuable, at least for my classes. That would have been valuable stuff for us to know, apply, and we can absolutely apply it to future, whether like college, whether working with kids. I mean, I remember like the JV coaches definitely like told us to drink water. Varsity, like they kind of toned down on that a little bit because they thought we knew by now. But yeah, I mean, it would have been so helpful just to receive that education that you're saying that more coaches are pushing for. My Cap's more focused on proper contact when it comes to pads than anything. At least from that's what it was back in the early 2010s.
Right. Yeah.
Do you make him go to like trainings, or is that like not within your job title?
That's definitely above my pay grade. but yeah, I think what the athletics department, at least for at Willow Glen High School, I think what we do a good job of, and I think Eric Ostrowski, our athletic director, he's very open-minded for me to educate coaches and players and things like that. So
good.
Being able to pass out flyers and really host talks and really getting to just have that community education. I think that's definitely one of the big points that helped me a lot and made my job a whole lot easier, was being able to educate, even though it was just me. And and maybe physicians and physical therapists that were associated with us. I think that was just that community education was definitely helpful, especially for things that that may seem very I shouldn't say trivial. I'm trying to think of another word. It's just it seems very like banal just to really like, oh, you got to drink water, you got to do this, you got to do this, but then there's more to it. And luckily we haven't had to deal with a serious case that was a consequence of heat illness or concussions or anything like that. So yeah, being able to prevent it first and foremost with the community education, that's definitely been helpful.
Yeah, I mean, my brother's doing cross country at Will Glen right now. I'm sure he'd love just to hear stuff along those lines, because he's been running, exercising a lot. So just to have that further education is arsenal would really help him as he goes into more rigorous exercises, because I believe he's going to be on varsity this year. I know they're going to ramp it up quite a bit. So
Yeah,
I wish we had all of that, because we didn't get too much of that back then.
right. All right, cool. Is there let's see, we're approaching 7:30, but yeah, I want to know if there's anyone else who has any thoughts. So last call for Think and Drink. Anyone else want to add anything, what you guys felt about these two articles? Anything you guys want to add? Okay. Yeah. Oh,
Well,
yeah.
Something I constantly, and this goes on to maybe another part of this subject a little bit, constantly batting with our administration about how we deal with heat illness and stuff. Right? Gold standard is rectal temperature. They won't let us touch it. So if we're not able to do the gold standard, how are we supposed to be able to do it? Now, I'm not trained in it, haven't done it, so maybe I shouldn't be doing it. But do you guys have, like, Josh, do you guys have protocols that you guys use? Do you have that put in?
I've personally never seen a rectal thermometer used.
Okay.
So any of the other places that I've been, I mean, we at KU we had it. Thankfully we didn't need to use it, but it was at every practice. At Akron, it was at every practice. I don't even think our sports med staff has one here at SDSU. If we do, it's in a doc's office, and I've never seen it.
Yeah.
So
to me, it's the big point of it is, hey, let's stop them before they get there, right? Let's be cognizant and aware, and let's not get to that point, because then we're in big trouble if we are, huh? So
Yeah.
I just wonder, like, legally, if you're not doing gold standard, are you going to put yourself in a bad position?
I 100% agree. I think that there's a few things that hopefully as I'm here a little bit longer, I'm able to have a little bit more input on, to try to bring some of those things to light, because I think we've been really lucky, and because we've been lucky, we've been able to not have things in writing as good as it probably should be.
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely some things that could be reviewed, and just maybe just the wording changed a little bit. I don't think we do anything wrong here. It's just like you said, if you don't have it to CYA, eventually it's going to come back to bite you. So.
Personally, that's why I love living in California, because I hope I never have to deal with this at all.
Yeah.
I never want to have to be in that position where I think, oh, I should do that. No, I don't want to. But having policies and procedures to kind of protect yourself, I think, is a key.
Yes. Yeah, I cannot think in a million years that we would use a rectal thermistor at the high school setting. Especially with how protected and conservative the Santa Clara County is. It's it's a touchy subject, but I hope to just rely on just like the signs and just not having to go through that battle and being able to catch it on time.
I couldn't even imagine trying to have that conversation with the parents of a minor. Like at the high school setting, there's some schools, I mean, I follow a lot of the bigger athletic trainers in Texas and high school on Twitter, and like they have it in the policy, and the parents agree to it on the front end, and it's all this big legal waiver. So in case they ever need to do it, they have consent. And if they don't, obviously, which sounds like it would create a headache to be like, does this kid have consent to get the rectal temp?
Yeah, that I can't imagine. Yeah, just like trying to remember who has consent and who doesn't, and then in the moment of just like in the heated moment, like no pun intended, but just it's just like how would you be able to make that split decision that would cost someone's life? Like,
Yeah, and that's stuff. When in doubt, I mean, it's possible to over chill, but when in doubt, get him in the tub. Don't get him in the tub till EMS arrives, and do the best you can with the temps that you can get if you're ever legal question. But I mean, obviously, the gold standard is the gold standard. There's just no way around that.
Yeah. Agreed.
Josh, you guys have tubs ready just in case, or?
We have one that we use, and we have ice prepped and ready during camp. Once we get through camp, we really kind of don't have one on the daily ready.
Yeah.
Just because the temps drop so low, it would be highly unlikely. Once again, at KU, even when it was 40 degrees out at the end of the season at Thanksgiving, we still put it up because that was one of those things. It was in the protocol, and it was what we're going to do. And I didn't have a problem with it because I'd rather over prepare than get caught with my pants down. So
I agree.
Right.
Josh, where are you coach at?
An athletic trainer at San Diego State.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Cool. Anyone else want to comment on our topic today?
With now, I did undergrad at UCF, and over in Orange County, everything, the gold standard with taking rectal temps, some of my classmates got to experience some of that at the high school setting. But so over there, it's like, it's normal. It's, with the thick packet of waivers they do have to sign, they have to be aware of, this is the gold standard, this is how we measure in the case of emergency when we suspect this, yada, yada, yada. But across Florida, not all counties are actually on the same page. So there's actually not, I don't even think it's 50% that there are athletic trainers in the high school setting. So like the county that I currently live in, they're mandating all high schools to have at least one athletic trainer on site, but that only started within the year.
Oh, wow.
So definitely for my county could be relatively new on the, policies and protocols just for this county. Obviously, I would think that it would be similar because of what the standards are. But then again, different school boards might have different, I guess you can say on certain things that happens in their counties. So I found that to be a very interesting. And then starting in, middle of March, then, all athletic trainers that were with all the high schools were actually, in a way, I guess you can say, temporary leave because all sports were.
This is Hillsborough County, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's been on the news quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a travesty.
But yeah, like Scott had mentioned earlier, it actually started the mandate for at least one athletic trainer in all high schools in my county because there was a death from exertional heat stroke over a year ago at a high school.
I think there was one a year ago, and there's another one not too long ago too. And like Philip mentioned too, there's one every year. It seems like so.
Yeah,
one too many.
Right. Yeah. It shouldn't have to be an unanswered question. I think the people that are above our pay grade has to make the right call to really prevent another death from something that's 100% preventable. That's what I'm gonna say. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So yeah, I really enjoyed tonight's talk. I really appreciated everyone's contributions about heat illnesses and just the heat tolerance going into the educational part of it. I thought everything that we talked about was so valuable, and I can't wait to upload this onto YouTube already. I think this is just a awesome was an awesome session just to hear from everyone and all the different perspectives from all over the country. I think this is awesome. So what we'll do is in 2 weeks we'll have another think and drink. So just as usual, I'll since Paka is out of town, I'll make sure we get a survey out, and then probably by Monday we'll announce the new topic. So yeah, this is great, and it's a great way to just get into July 4th. I know you guys are all waiting to waiting to move on to the weekend. So yeah, I won't hold you guys any longer, but once again, thank you so much for participating. I hope you guys took away a lot of different messages tonight, and yeah, stay safe. Enjoy your July 4th weekend. Have a great time.
Great. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. Take care.